to go back and talk a little bit about the history of our organization. The House of the Seven Gables, as most people have heard of it, may not be aware, it was built in 1668, so it's one of the oldest wooden frame mansions in the country. And it was built using the wealth that was earned in Salem's colonial and China trade. So it was popularized, however, when Nathaniel Hawthorne, after visiting his cousin Suzanne Ingersoll here, decided to write a novel that was set and based in the house. So we have fortune, we have fame. The house, as well as several other houses here on our National Historic Landmark District, were saved by philanthropy. A woman named Caroline Emerton, who is both a preservationist and part of what is called the settlement movement, purchased the House of the Seven Gables and turned it into a museum, specifically to use the proceeds to help people in the community. She had social workers that came and worked at the House of the Seven Gables and actually lived in the House of the Seven Gables. They settled in the neighborhood of the people that they were trying to serve. That's where the term settlement comes from. The people they were trying to serve were the new immigrants that were coming here to Salem to make a living in the factories and right across the harbor there at Shetland Park and elsewhere in Salem. So here, her settlement workers were giving tours, but they were also providing English lessons, sewing classes, cooking, carpentry, and things to help people live successfully here in their new home. This mission to preserve the site and also help our community continues to this day. We preserve, share, and continue the American story. Right now, at this moment, we have probably about 50 people, adults, over in Shetland Park, where they used to go to work. They are now over there learning English from our instructors. So we have adult ESL and citizenship classes. We have a summer school program for English language learners in elementary school, and we have a series of community conversations focused on the topic of immigration. We hope that you share this information with others. We hope to see you back here again and again. We have a great lineup, thanks to Julie Allison Bishop over there, of fabulous lectures based on focusing on enterprising women, but also continuing with our community conversation series. Last year we did the Becoming American film series. This year we have a series of films that were made by and are about local immigrants. So we hope you choose to join us in those conversations as well. We earn a lot of our money that funds our programs as well as preserve our site from admissions, but not all of it. We really need the support of others. Membership is one way. We hope you consider becoming a member. We hope you visit, shop in our store, or just give us cash. We'll always take that. But I don't want to talk too much about it. Happy to take questions afterward. I do want to introduce Julie Allison Bishop. She is our Director of Community Engagement and oversees all of our public programming, our visitation, as well as our settlement programs with the help of Elsa Bowen Cohen. She put together this lecture, inviting wonderful people like Diane here, so I'm going to pass it over to her.
Well, thank you. So, good evening, everybody. And again, like Kara said, welcome to the House of the Seven Gables. We're so delighted to have all of you here tonight, and also our fabulous speaker, Diane Portnoy. When our staff was kind of talking a couple of years ago, and because we plan our programming a couple of years in advance, and we knew that this was a massive milestone in American women's history this year with the 100th anniversary of the passage of suffrage, that we wanted to do something a little bit different here at the Gables, because not only do we want to celebrate extraordinary women of the past, we want to celebrate extraordinary women of the present, and also think about the future contributions of women in our society as well. And looking at somebody like Diane Portnoy, we are so delighted to have her here. She herself will be sharing a little bit of her own family's immigrant story with you tonight, but how her own family story inspired her to found the Immigrant Learning Center, which is an organization down in Malden. And the more that we look at the needs of the immigrant community around Greater Boston, the luckier we are to have organizations like the House of the Seven Gables, like the North Shore CDC, like the Immigrant Learning Centers. We're really fortunate to have so many places for our newly arriving families to connect, to learn English, to find pathways to citizenship and more. So since Diane's talk is a little bit about her tonight and a little bit about the Immigrant Learning Center, I won't go into a bio, but I would love to introduce Diane Portnoy, the founder of the Immigrant Learning Center.
Okay, can everybody hear me? I'm sometimes told I have a quiet voice. Well, first of all, thank you so much for that introduction. And as Julie told you, I'm Diane Portnoy. I'm the founder and CEO of the Immigrant Learning Center in Malden. It really is my pleasure to be here this evening. And thank you so much for coming out to hear my story. You know, it really is a huge honor to be considered an enterprising woman as part of this celebration of the 19th Amendment. You know, gaining the right to vote gave women a voice where previously they had been silenced. At the Immigrant Learning Center, our mission is to give immigrants a voice. And we do this in 3 ways. First, since opening the ILC in 1992, we've been providing free English classes year-round, so far to more than 10,500 immigrant and refugee adults from 122 countries who live in 95 greater Boston communities. You know, by learning to communicate and adapt to their new homes, they are able to become successful workers, parents, and community members. Many of them become citizens, they vote, and interestingly, over the years, over half of our students have been women. Now, recently, you may have heard some unflattering things said about immigrants, and it's possible that not all of them are true. It really is harder than it should be to find the truth. And that's why the second way we give immigrants a voice is through our Public Education Institute. And through the Institute, we educate Americans on the many reasons immigrants are assets to this country. We amplify their voices and help them tell their stories through free webinars, in-person presentations, online resources, and an annual Immigrant Entrepreneur Awards dinner. Lastly, because the truth can be hard to find, we back up our education efforts with research. And through a joint venture with George Mason University in Virginia, we launched the Institute for Immigration Research to conduct research on the economic contribution of immigrants. We have published reports on immigrants as Nobel laureates, as teachers, as baseball players, even truck drivers. And the Institute also makes available immigration data on demand on its website, where anyone can request specific immigration data that they need. Okay, now of course none of this happened overnight. As I said, the Immigrant Learning Center was launched in 1992. Now I'm going to tell you how that happened, but first, I'd like you to hear about our work directly from some of our students. We're going to show a short video.
Today, the great immigration debate is on. Some stand up to welcome immigrants to America. Others say they pose a danger. And that is why there is an urgency now to give immigrants the voice they need so that they can show Americans that their story is our story. Imagine one day leaving all that you know and love behind and taking off to a land that is completely foreign.
Hard moment, actually. Like, it's more emotional moments, like when you say bye to your family.
Immigrants who make that decision come to America for many different reasons.
The freedom is worth the freedom.
It's hard to live in my country. It's very dangerous, you know.
There's something inside me want more out of life.
But they all bring one thing that is the same: a remarkable determination to make a new and better life.
That risk-taking, that determination, that's what sets them apart. These people are different.
For most immigrants, arriving in America is the fulfillment of a long-standing dream. But it can instantly become a nightmare.
Came to the Boston, Logan International Boston. I wasn't expecting someone to show up and meet me. He didn't show up, he didn't call. I don't have no destination. I don't have no friend waiting for me. I have no house to rest. And the worst of the thing, I don't speak English.
Suddenly, nothing is more important than learning English.
It's the first step. The dream won't happen without this.
I was working with my coworkers in Family Dollar, and he told me that there is a school in Malton called Immersion Classes.
It's a school that offers immigrants immersion instruction in English. And best of all, it is free.
In, out, up, down.
Step inside any classroom and what you see is an inspiring work ethic. No group of people is more motivated to succeed.
I know one day I want to be somebody. I want to finish my diploma, then I want to have a better job. Then that's my goal. I dream every single day.
The students here come from 118 countries.
The ILC is a lesson on immigrant integration for the students who come here. They are surrounded by people of all different cultures and ethnicities and backgrounds, and they learn to not just tolerate each other, but embrace each other and love each other.
And as performers in a theater class show, their stories are all familiar.
Where are you from?
From.
Are you from Haiti?
Haiti, yes.
Everyone here has a story like that. But as students' English improves, their lives are entirely changed.
People ask you something at the street and you, oh my God, people talk to me. And now I'm so proud of me because I can talk to people.
When I speak with my kids' teachers, I have a good conversation with them. I can understand what they say. I can understand what my kids need.
Boston, I'm alone. What happened next?
As English speakers, ILC students have a new voice. But they also have a chance here to amplify that voice.
So we have checks and balances so that one branch of the government does not...
These students are studying to become American citizens.
Whether it's Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump.
I want to become an American citizen because I want to vote. I want to understand history of America and the laws of America.
And for those who pass the test, there is a big day. Every year, the ILC hosts a ceremony where new Americans take the oath of allegiance.
That I will support and defend the Constitution and laws.
And I get a certificate for the citizenship. Yeah, so happy. Yeah. I never forget. Yes.
I always thank them for coming to America because of the contributions I know they're going to make. They're going to make a difference.
And chances are that difference will begin with something like this. Lily's Nail Salon, owned and operated by former ILC student Fong Wen, who is taking a chance with his own small business.
And I'm like, well, let's play the game to see who's winner. And so far, I am.
That little nail salon is truly a symbol of what immigrants bring to this country. It's a symbol of the communities that they slowly help to revitalize. And it's a symbol of their desire to succeed.
And it is that desire to succeed and willingness to take a risk that immigrants bring with them that makes them invaluable to America. All they really need is a launch pad, a place to find their voice. Because when they succeed, we all do.
I changed my life. Come here. Thank you.
That video was made for our 25th anniversary celebration, which was 2 years ago. It's actually 27 years now. And I don't know if you know, they're talking about 118 countries our students come from. It's now 122. So, before I became what you call an enterprising woman, I learned from my parents. In fact, both of my parents were huge inspirations in my life and a driving force behind my work. In 1938, my parents lived in the city of Kalisz in Poland, in the Jewish ghetto. My mother was 18, my father was 20, and they got married that year. A year later, the Nazis invaded Poland and annexed Kalisz. Now, my father was a champion ping pong player, and therefore one of the more high-profile Jews in the community. The Nazis had him arrested, beaten, and imprisoned. Now, fortunately, the Polish guard recognized my father and actually let him go. He rushed home. He told my mother, "We're packing our bags. Say goodbye as quickly as you can, and we're leaving." Now, my mother came from a family of 8 brothers and sisters. Her youngest brother was 8 years old. The younger sister was 12. My father had 2 younger sisters and a younger brother. And their extended families included over 300 people. None of them survived the war. In fact, by the end of the war, Kalisz had less than half of its pre-war population of 89,000. My parents never saw their family or their friends again. Now, they didn't talk much about the war or how they survived as I was growing up. They really didn't want to talk about it. But what I do know is they got on that next train out of the city and continued moving from city to city ahead of the German armies until they ended up in Siberia working as slave laborers for the Russians. And my father would say they built bridges during the day and blew them up at night as part of the resistance movement. Now, I know they were somehow separated during the last year of the war, but have no idea where they were or what they were doing. So when the war ended in 1945, survivors made their way back home. There were no cell phones, no internet, and in many places home wasn't much more than rubble. In Kalisz, there was this huge tree in front of City Hall where survivors would leave notes telling whoever found the note where they were. My father came back first, left a note, my mother found it, and so they were reunited. And by the way, that tree still exists. My son Alan was there a few years ago for business, and he looked at that tree. It's still there. Well, I was born a year later in a part of Poland that the Russians occupied and would later become East Germany. Even though the war was over and the Nazis were no longer in charge, we still were not safe. While my mother was in labor giving birth to me, she accidentally spoke Yiddish. And the doctor looked at my father and accusingly said, "You're Jews." Now my father, who was a very strong but very gentle man as I knew him, pulled out a gun and said, "If anything happens to this woman or this baby, I'm going to kill you." And that's the world I was born into. Now, it became very obvious to my parents that remaining there was extremely dangerous. So when I was a couple of months old, they paid a truck driver to hide us and drive us over the border into the part of Germany that was controlled by Americans. Today, if we were seeking that kind of asylum from violence in Central America, that truck driver would be called a coyote, and my parents and I would be called illegals. Well, my parents survived by working on the black market, but they knew there was nothing left for us in Europe. You know, no family, no friends, no real future. Everything pretty much had been destroyed. And so they decided they were going to immigrate, either to the United States or Israel. Then in 1948, remember I was born in 1946, so this is 2 years later, under President Truman, Congress passed the Displaced Persons Act, which allotted an additional 400,000 visas to those displaced by the war, and of those, 198,000 were allocated to Jewish survivors. Well, my parents applied, we were vetted, and through a lottery system, were chosen to immigrate to the United States. We came on an American converted battleship in the fall of 1949, when I was 3½. And again, my parents were separated. Men staying on one side of the boat, children and mothers on the other. Well, on the journey, I became very ill with whooping cough, which was considered a very contagious disease. So we landed at Ellis Island, and there was a good chance we were going to be sent back. I sometimes joke they decided not to because I was a cute little girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. They didn't send my mother and me back. Instead, we were quarantined for 10 days in that hospital on Ellis Island. And in the process, my name was changed from Dina, D-I-N-A, to Diane. So the staff at Ellis Island had Americanized it. Well, obviously, I got better. And we were met by a refugee committee that put us on a bus and sent us to live, believe it or not, in Malden, Massachusetts, where I grew up. But that really is not the end of the story. It really is just the beginning. After all that trauma, we arrived in a new country with no family. This is really my parents. No family, no friends, no money, not knowing the language or the culture. Now, I will say my parents felt safe from violence for the first time since before the war. But they were not safe from discrimination. Of course, some Americans were very welcoming, but others would say nasty things to them right in public, like Hitler should have finished the job. Yeah. So we lived in a community made up entirely of Holocaust survivors, where no one spoke English. Just Yiddish was the common language, even in the stores and in the bank. And my parents made some friends, all of whom had lost spouses and children in the war, were now remarried and creating new families. To me, that was amazing after what they had gone through. Of course, I was sent to school immediately, so I learned English pretty quickly. But for my parents and others in the community, it was very difficult. There were no free schools, and certainly no money to pay for school. But somehow they found jobs in a sweater factory in the neighborhood. And I don't know how, but they learned English. My father actually became the superintendent of that factory. Okay, now, you saw the citizenship swearing-in ceremony in the video. I remember the day when my parents were sworn in as citizens. I was 8 years old, and their joy was palpable. You could just feel it. And 6 months later, I received my citizenship papers. That's why each year, when we have the Immigrant Learning Center's citizenship swearing-in ceremony, it's at the Malden High School auditorium, actually. I see that same joy on the hundreds of faces of immigrants and their families as they become citizens. And that's the typical immigrant story. My parents and their friends eventually bought homes, opened businesses, sent their children to college, and they created good lives in this country, contributing to the economy and their communities. I continue to see this on a daily basis. I personally come from a very there they are, and my little brother who was born here. Okay, so I personally come from a very enterprising family. My parents opened their own business selling discounted sweaters. It was called Sylvia's Sweater Outlet. My mother's name is Sylvia. My brother, my little brother, who was born in this country, has his own apparel business. And my husband, Barry, was a very successful lawyer for many years, but eventually became a full-time entrepreneur that created businesses that today employ over 50,000 people nationwide. But I was very content with my career in education and raising my 2 children, until I saw people in need who I knew I could help, and I had to do something. It was the late 1980s. I was working part-time in a government-funded adult education center right here in Peabody. My youngest child, Sandy, was about to go on to Vanderbilt University. In the outside world, the Berlin Wall had come down and Eastern Europe opened. And suddenly, Russia allowed its citizens to emigrate, and thousands started to come to the United States. And thousands of Jews actually moved into the Boston area. And in addition, Vietnamese who had been living for decades in refugee camps as a result of the Vietnam War were suddenly permitted to enter the country. So at work, I saw this huge influx of immigrants. Free programs like the one I was working in only offered immigrants 4 hours of instruction a week. And many were bilingual programs. Also, the curriculums are not relevant to their needs. Growing up, I personally witnessed and experienced the struggles of creating a new life in a new country. I understood that after finding a place to live and food to eat, learning the language and how to navigate our economic, educational, and social systems is vital. So I could see that these people who had already been through so much were not going to get what they needed. Now, previously in my career, I had set up and directed a couple of adult education programs for private businesses and had done some teacher training for the state of Massachusetts. So between my professional and personal experiences, I felt I could set up a program that better met the needs of these new arrivals. And I started to seriously think about starting my own school that would provide free, intensive instruction, where adult students would be immersed in the language and with a relevant life skills curriculum. All right, so where do I start? I want to start a school. How do you start a school, right? Well, like all entrepreneurs, I needed funding. And like most immigrant entrepreneurs, I turned to family and friends. Now, people thought I really was trying to do the impossible. Start a free school out of nowhere. But enough people chipped in that I was able to raise $110,000 in startup funds, and that includes money my husband and I put in as well. And I have to tell you, as the CEO, I've been raising money every day since then. Only now I have to raise $2.5 million a year for the program. I'm fortunate enough that I haven't needed to spend any of that money on my own salary. For the past 27 years, all our funds have gone to hiring the most talented workforce and creating the best possible programs. So, in order to get some of this funding, I needed to establish the Immigrant Learning Center as a 501c3 corporation, so donors could deduct their contributions in their taxes. Now, I mentioned my husband Barry started as a lawyer, and some of his former colleagues offered their services pro bono, very nice. I can still remember meeting with them. It was January 1992, and they were happy to do a favor for Barry. But I felt they were not taking me seriously. They saw me as the wife of a very successful businessman, obviously looking for something to fill her time now that her children were grown. Well, it wasn't the first or the last time. I think I've been underestimated, and my determination never wavered. Okay, so I had initial funding, was getting legal, not-for-profit status, as well as putting a board of directors together. Okay, now I had to decide, how big is the school going to be? Where do I want the school to be located? I have to rent space, hire teachers, write a curriculum. Most important, I had to find students. So I knew I wanted the school to be in a community that had a significant number of foreign-born population, no pre-existing free school, and near public transportation so they could get to the school. I narrowed it down to Malden and Revere. And I chose Malden when I found a landlord willing to give me 8 months free rent in an office building. It's all right, this is where we'll be. So I rented 5 rooms in this office building, 3 classrooms, a reception area, and an office for me. It was on the 3rd floor, down a maze of hallways. Trust me, you never would have found it, but immigrants always found it. And I furnished the rooms by getting used furniture donated from various businesses that were remodeling. So to this day, most of our furniture is donated, and I still have my original office furniture. And now I got to work on the curriculum. Based on my teaching experience with recent immigrants, I knew I needed to create intensive immersion classes for the students. Now, because the students were coming from many different countries and spoke many different languages, instruction had to be in English. And the lessons would be skills-based, so that while students learned English, they would also learn important skills for getting established in this country. I decided on 3 levels of classes, beginning, intermediate, and high, and each class would meet Monday through Friday from 9 to 12 hours a week. And we would have 3 sessions a year, September to December, January to April, May to August. Each prospective student would be personally interviewed to determine class placements, and students would move through the classes at their own pace. And as soon as one student left, another would be brought in from the waiting list. I also decided the students would be required to come to school every day on time with a limited number of absences. And this was considered harsh at the time, I know. But the program is built on the idea of intensive learning to get the most benefit quickly. Plus, from my perspective, it's unkind to let someone who can't consistently make it to class use a seat that someone on the waiting list could be using. 27 years later, we have 5 levels of regular classes. We have 3 levels of literacy classes, morning and afternoon, as well as specialty classes such as citizenship preparation classes, conversation classes for the elderly, and we really do continue to follow these same principles. While I was writing the curriculum, I hired 3 teachers, a receptionist, and got a former colleague of mine, a guidance counselor, to help screen student applicants. Again, my biggest fear was opening a school and no students would come. So, I made sure that every school, organization, church, synagogue, community center, every immigrant would know about this free school. I started with the yellow pages of the phone book. Remember, and I typed over 300 letters. You have to remember, this is before computers and the internet. I went and spoke wherever they would let me. I created flyers by myself and walked up and down the streets of Malden, putting them up in restaurants and businesses. And the running joke was that I became a streetwalker. Well, finally the day came to open the school November 9th, 1992. We were fully enrolled with 60 students, and we had a waiting list of 80. Wow. Within a year, we were bursting at the seams. We added afternoon classes and had moved to the basement of our present location. I personally did everything from answering the phone, greeting students, interviewing, placing students, data collection, budgets, meeting prospective donors, writing proposals, to doing presentations about the school. Well, we've grown steadily over the years, and there really were challenges at every turn. Every time our capacity grows, the waiting list grows with it. We now occupy 4 floors in our building with our name right in front. I think you saw it in the video. It was very exciting when I saw the sign go up, the Immigrant Learning Center. We serve 900 students a year with a waiting list that sometimes reaches 1,000. Yeah. Every time we opened another class, particularly what some would consider an unconventional class, like our theater class, it was a risk. Now, making the decision to depend primarily on private funding was certainly unusual. However, I still applied for funding from the Massachusetts Department of Education when its grant cycle opened after we were in operation for 3 years. I wrote a proposal and was very excited when we received our first grant of $35,000 a year for 3 years. And we've continued to receive state grants ever since. It provides about 20% of our current budget. Now, funding from the Department of Education gives us the capacity to serve students that we otherwise could not. But we've been able to adjust to students' needs much faster using funds from private donors. Our entire literacy program, our family literacy program, our computer labs are privately funded and likely would not exist if not for the non-government donors. I also wanted to create a rainy day fund. Of course, I was told it was impossible. I actually went to speak to a professor at Harvard Business School about this, And he told me a small, unknown organization like mine could never do that. So I learned that hearing you can't do that is a great motivator for me. Today we have almost $5 million in an endowment. And I sleep sounder knowing that something unforeseen happens. That fund can keep us going for at least a couple of years. Now, I told you my parents and world events motivated me to open the Immigrant Learning Center. The same was certainly true for the creation of our Public Education Institute. After the 9/11 attacks, the halls of our school, which are normally a lively, bustling place, were quiet. The classrooms were half empty. Our students were afraid to come to school because strangers would yell terrible things at them on the streets. Once again, I thought of my parents and the impact that the insults of strangers had on them. And people who knew me, knew I was an immigrant, knew the work I was doing, would actually say, you know, Diane, the problem with this country is immigrants. And so, on the news and out of politicians' mouths, I heard all kinds of untruths being told about immigrants. I don't know if you realize, but at that time, every major newspaper in the country, other than the Wall Street Journal, wrote editorials describing immigrants as deficits. Well, I'm an immigrant. We're a nation of immigrants. I work with immigrants every day, and I knew this wasn't true. I also knew that someone had to tell the other side of the story. So I wanted to start a public education program to educate Americans about the positive impact immigrants have on the country, our economy, our culture, and communities. A few of my board members felt adding this to our mission was a mistake. They felt we were too small an organization to have any impact, and it would be a waste of resources. However, a majority of the board members agreed with me. And when I hired a director for the ILC's Public Education Institute, 2 of the board members even resigned. Well, today the Institute is nationally recognized as a force for change. The public ed staff holds free webinars attended by stakeholders throughout the country. They present at national conferences, they speak at local schools and libraries, create curriculums for use in middle and high school, and has an online library, making available major resources about research about the impact of immigrants. And they've helped change the discourse about immigrants, so that in many cities and towns throughout the United States, immigrants and refugees are seen as assets. Now, making sure young people, our next generation, understands the role immigrants play in our country is vital. So therefore, in addition to holding teacher webinars and creating curriculums, this year we established a youth board. And the board is made up of 14 high school students who are learning not only how a not-for-profit works, but also about the impact immigrants have on our country and economy. And they'll be sharing this information with their schools, friends, family through conversations, writing articles for the school newspapers and local papers. In addition, they do volunteer work at the schools, such as taking part in our family literacy events and helping out in the classrooms. And they're even talking about maybe doing a fundraiser for the schools, so that would be nice as well. Now, of course, we have to back all our statements about immigrants with credible data. Initially, we commissioned research from local scholars, which is still available on our website. And just as I had suspected, the research supported the idea that immigrants are assets. Well, eventually became apparent to me for the sake of credibility, efficiency, and impact, we needed a dedicated research institute within a major university. So 7 years ago, we partnered with George Mason University in Virginia to create an Institute for Immigration Research. The partnership continues to produce unbiased research, which has clearly shown the positive impact immigrants have on our economy and country. Well, unfortunately, there's still a lot of work to be done. So a few years ago, while arguing with the TV news, which I do on a regular basis, I decided to create a book that would shed light on current events with some historical perspective. Anti-immigrant sentiment is almost as old as the country itself. We keep making the same mistakes over and over, scapegoating each new wave of immigrants. So published in 2013 by George Mason University, Immigrant Struggles, Immigrant Gifts, they're still available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. It contains 11 essays written by 11 scholars describing the history of 11 different immigrant groups. And the same negative stereotypes were said about each group, and each group went on to make significant contributions. In fact, many of these groups, like Irish, Italians, Germans, Eastern Europeans, no longer face discrimination as immigrants. We were all just considered Americans. It's my hope that by understanding our history, we can learn to stop repeating it. So I'm here today telling you my story because I'm thought of as, quote unquote, an enterprising woman. The reality is that all immigrants are enterprising. Moving is considered one of life's top 10 stressors, right up there with death of a loved one, divorce, and job loss. Have any of you ever had to move to a new city? Anybody move to a new country? All right. You're going to know what I'm talking about. Now, you may have heard a TED Talk or read an article about the importance of grit. Well, it takes courage, intelligence, resourcefulness, and grit to leave your country, your family, your friends, your language, and everything you've ever known about how life works to start over somewhere new. And it turns out that those are some of the same characteristics that it takes to start a new enterprise. I said that part of our mission is to educate Americans on the ways that immigrants are assets. One important contribution is business and job creation. Immigrants are twice as likely to start companies as the US-born population, and refugees are even more entrepreneurial. Currently, 14% of the US population is foreign-born. Yet nearly a third of Main Street businesses and 55% of the country's startup companies worth $1 billion or more were founded by immigrants. More than 40% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or the children of immigrants. And you can learn about some of them on our website. We have an Immigrant Entrepreneur Hall of Fame dedicated to pioneers such as Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone and founder of AT&T, Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, and Charles Pfizer, the founder of Pfizer. Now, you may have noticed that those are all men. Well, it's only been 100 years since women had the right to vote in this country. And really more than that, since we had the right to own property. Did you realize it wasn't until 1974 that it became illegal for banks to require a man to co-sign a loan for women? So, although there are fewer of them, on our website, we do have women in our Hall of Fame. For example, there's Helen Reiner, the co-founder of iRoba, and Eleanor Browning Scripps, who created an empire of social good organizations, such as Scripps Institution of Oceanography and Scripps Health. Of course, most enterprising women and immigrants are not famous. And that's why we created Immigrant Entrepreneur Awards I mentioned earlier. Every year, the awards raise the profile of immigrant entrepreneurs in Massachusetts. I've been able to meet so many inspiring women that way. Last year, in the neighborhood business category, the winner was Jessie Felix. She is from the Dominican Republic. Her mother brought her and her sister to the United States looking for a way to support her children after their father died. Jessie grew up here and opened a doggy daycare in Jamaica Plain. So not only does she provide a valuable service in the community, Jessie makes a point of hiring, training, and offering a career path to hard-to-employ community members. You know, so look at businesses in your community, and you'll find many of them have a story like this. As I said before, more than 10,500 have passed through our doors since the ILC opened. A majority of them women. Each one had a story. And I've been fortunate to hear many of them. Harrowing stories, moving stories, funny stories, but all of them very inspiring. So I'm going to leave you with just the story of one particularly enterprising woman from Brazil. Her name is Maria. And Maria owned 2 salons in Brazil and had 40 years of experience in the industry. When her children were grown and living independently, she wanted to blaze a new trail for herself. Even though she knew very little English, she chose to move to the United States. Like many skilled immigrants, Maria found she had to go through a recertification process in order to continue in her field. So she opened a small clothing company, a store to support herself while she worked on getting her Massachusetts cosmetology and massage licenses. Once she got her licenses, she opened a day spa in Everett called Nova Estetica, while at the same time coming to class to improve her English. She continues to be a happy and successful businesswoman. Okay, my parents were my initial inspiration, and I have continued to be inspired by our students. No matter where they're from, they're family to me. And many of our students feel the same. If you ever feel down, if you ever feel depressed, please visit our classes. Talk to our students. Hear about their hopes and dreams and their determination to make them happen. And that's what the United States of America represents. Now, before I wrap this up, it's important to point out that I haven't exactly achieved everything on my own. You know, throughout the years, I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by incredibly capable, creative, dedicated, forward-looking staff, very supportive board members, volunteers, and donors. And I also had my husband, Barry, for 50 years until he passed away 2 years ago. I want to tell you, Barry was my biggest supporter. He believed in the Immigrant Learning Center and our students, and he believed in me. He always said I could do it, even when everyone else said it couldn't be done. So thank you for your time and attention. I really appreciate this opportunity to share my story and a few others as enterprising women and immigrants. So I understand I'm the first speaker in this series. Okay, so thank you to the House of Secretaries. I wish I had time to meet every one of you. Do you want me to take questions?
Q&A, sure, absolutely.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Yes.
Your story was so inspiring. Thank you so much.
Oh,
My kids were born in Poland, so I just love your story, and I love what you've done for this community, for your students. Fabulous. I've recently gotten involved in being a volunteer ESL teacher in Beverly, at Beverly Library and Beverly Bootstrap.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, have you taught some of these other centers around you that are trying to be
I'm very
many years?
aware of them. They're all government funded centers. Operation Bootstrap, many years ago, its director and I were quite good friends. Her name was Ann Serino. She went on to become the director of Adult and Community Services for the state of Massachusetts. Yeah, so I'm very familiar with Operation Bootstrap. Yeah, it's a wonderful program. I have to tell you, all the programs are doing incredible work. And thank you to you as a volunteer. We have how many volunteers? Probably 60? 60 volunteers a year now that help us and they help our teachers. And they make such a difference in our students' lives because they can work with students one-on-one. And I don't know if that's what you're doing, but it really amazing. You have a small group.
Groups, but as far as I know, they only have volunteer teachers.
No, in our school, we actually have certified teachers. Many even have master's degrees. So probably some of our volunteers do too. They're very helpful. We're very, very grateful for what they bring to the school.
Can I just add? Hi, I also work at the Immigrant Learning Center. Some of our teachers do present workshops at statewide conferences, and sometimes we have groups come in to the school for workshops, and particularly our literacy program is somewhat unique, and so we've had lots of other people come to us for advice on how to manage students with low literacy. So I think
And what we mean by, I just
how
want to
we
say,
can help other programs.
yeah, by low
I'm sure you've
literacy.
inspired a lot of programs to start.
You're talking about people that never had the opportunity to perhaps go to school in their native countries. Some of them can speak English, but they cannot read and write. So can you imagine never having seen the written word, and now you're learning it in a totally different language? The other class that I find very amazing, people come when she does workshop, is we have a teacher who teaches citizenship preparation for students who are low literacy, who have such difficulty reading and writing. And the techniques that she uses to get them ready for the citizenship test, it's not that easy a test, you know. 100 questions you have to learn, even though they only ask you 10. Yeah, they're very, very committed and determined to become citizens.
Yeah, so you talked about your programs being during the day.
Yes, very deliberate.
How do you service those people who have to work to support themselves and also want to learn?
Well, when I started the school, I tried, remember, it's an intensive program. You have to come every day, or at least 4 days a week. It's 4 afternoons a week. So I said, okay, we're going to do 4 nights a week. We found that people will work all night and go to school right afterwards. Or they'll go to school in the morning and they go to work. But once they went home and had their dinner, it wasn't working. They were not coming to school every night. And so we made the decision that we were going to have our, we're going to use our resources for the morning and afternoon classes. We found that we were able to help more people that way. But there are free classes for evening, other programs, and our counselors will tell those people if they come in, they want to register, and they can only come to school at night, we'll refer them to other programs that better meet their needs.
Do you do speaking tours for fundraising purposes?
Do I what?
Do speaking tours for fundraising purposes? Do you go out and speak for fundraising?
Yeah.
Chambers, for example.
Yeah, I had a long time ago, when I first opened the school, and like I said, anybody call, they say, who are you, what are you, who am I going to speak to? You know, at this point, I'm very fortunate that we have a staff that's very good at going out and speaking in any kind of venue. So I don't speak in public as much as I used to. I will as much as I in public. Anything else? Oh, yeah.
What's the typical tenure of students? What's the range?
You know, that's a great question. It really depends on what level they start. If they're coming in and they're very, very, very low level, they could well be there a year or two. If they're coming, they're intermediate, and, you know, within 6 months, we might have helped them find a job. So really, it's so individualized. So we always talk in terms of seats. There are 20 seats in a class. But, you know, how many people, over the course of a year, you can have 3 people in that seat, maybe 2, maybe 1. It depends on the needs of the students. We really, really try to meet individual needs the way we do it. Okay, and you were going to say something?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for all your great work.
I appreciate that.
Such a wonderful resource for immigrants, and I really admire everything you do. So I'm a child of Indonesian immigrants, and my mom always tells a story where she got lost in the subway system in New York City, and she's like, well, thank God this homeless person helped me because nobody else would. It's such a challenge.
It's not unusual, by the way.
Right.
And my favorite, of course, are the vast majority of immigrants come to this country, and I'm sure it's probably true for you too, because they want a better life for their children. So I've had students who came to school and then went up the street to do laundry at the nursing home so her daughter could go to Harvard Law School. The woman who cleans our building, she comes in every day, Ava, her 2 sons got their PhDs in engineering. I'm trying to remember, she's from South America. Exactly what country, I don't know. And both her sons are engineers. I mean, isn't that, so you're investing. I keep telling everybody, you're investing in the future of the country. Judy, yes.
Diane, my grandparents came over from Russia, and my mother came over at 4 years old. And they both went to Ellis Island, but different times. My mother and her mother came over on steerage, and then 2 more boys were born, and they grew up, became pretty successful, and they had children. And one of their sons became an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
and he was my first cousin. I didn't know. I mean, it's a story I always remembered.
Thank you. Yeah.
And one last question, anybody? Well, go ahead.
I could just ask a million questions because I'm just fascinated by this topic, and I came to it only this year, so this is not my background to teach English as a second language. But my daughter just did a thesis on what makes for a quality pre-K education experience, and I just wonder, do you see any, I know you can't generalize, but what student learns the best? Is a foreigner who started English in their foreign country? Like I don't know how to explain it, but how...
In terms of skills...
I think it must be very hard to figure out, should they be beginner, intermediate, advanced? How do you test them, and how do you...
We at this point,
yeah.
When they come in for their initial interview, there are specific questions we ask them. And the counselor asks them. And based on how that person answers the question, and if they are able, we ask them to write a short essay to answer a question. So we have a sense.
The essay
in English, they sit down. And so we begin to have a sense of sort of what level they should begin. Some students, though, actually most students, have to wait anywhere from 6, 8 months to a year before we call them in. And when they are called in to come to school, there is a particular test that we give them individually that's, that the state has developed and that we use, called Best Plus test.
Best Plus?
Yes, I'm sure Operation Bootstrap, or at least they used to do it.
Best
Yeah,
Plus,
Best
okay,
Plus.
that's interesting.
Yeah, so there's a specific test that we give them, and that determines exactly which class they're going to be placed in.
And we also use a similar test, or we use the Best Plus assessment here for our classes as well. Our settlement programs manager, Al Spilberg Cullen, just incorporated this within the last year or so. And not only does it give us kind of the pre-class assessment, but we also use it as assessment to help students decide if it's time to move on to the next level, or if they're completed with ESL and time to move on to citizenship. So it would be well worth looking into for your
And
organization.
remember, we do evaluations throughout, each session is 4 months. So there are, there's a beginning evaluation, and then based on what happens in the class today, determines what you're going to do tomorrow. So you have the basic curriculum, the subject matter that you want to cover, the skills that you want to cover. And we have that, now the whole staff works on that. And so you can see how the people move through it and how you want to try to individualize it as much as possible is what we do.
And they go to school from what time to what time? What, in the afternoon they have to be there at 12 and they stay till 5?
12 to 3, Monday through Thursday, Monday through Friday, now 9 to 11:30. Not quite as much. Teachers need a half-hour break. After lunch, right?
It is.
Take a break, get a cup of coffee. So,
Yeah, I would also just add, students who have studied English in their home country before they come tend to have the opposite problem with the literacy students. So they probably understand reading and writing better than speaking and listening, because usually they're taught by non-native speakers. So the accent, the colloquialisms, the axioms, all that is just completely confusing.
And correct me if you might have, my understanding is too that people that are literate in their home language, whether it's child or an adult, if they know how to read and write in their own language, they'll pick up how to read and write in English.
well, we understand the concept.
So they have that, they have broken education or only limited education.
At this point, we also have academic and career counselors. So when students first start in the program, they begin to think about what their goals are. And, is there a particular career you'd be interested in? How do you get to that point? And the higher level students are in what we call the next steps class. So, we only go to a certain level. And you have to determine where the student's going to go from there, whether it's a job, a training program, college. JVS has a Bridges to College program that many of the students move on to, and we call it our Next Steps class. So we know that they're going on to say, they're not hanging out there.
Right, so stay
And a lot of resources go into that.
So the school is in Malden. But
Yes.
has so many different students. Are they coming from the greater Boston area? Are they all Massachusetts people? Or
Well, they have to come every day.
We had one from Rhode Island.
We have one from Rhode Island. And I can't.
122 countries and 2 states.
They live in Massachusetts. I'm amazed at how far they will travel sometimes to get to the school every day. That's how determined they are. I personally find it incredible. It's not easy.
No.
But once they're there, I mean, it's a joyous place, right? I mean, if you want to
Are you in public transportation or you're in downtown? You're in
Yes, right up the street.
Okay.
Many of our staff use it as well. Even though there is a parking lot. So, as I said, we try to help them the next day, but they do come.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
So on that note, I would like to say thank you so much for being here tonight. And again, as a reminder, you invited any of us to come to you and check out a class if you want to find some joy. The same invitation. And the same invitation exists.
That's the thing I want. If you want to be on our mailing list for any reason, I would recommend, how would you
Go to our website and click sign up for our newsletter.
Okay, the website is www.ilctr.org. And get on our mailing list. There are great things. Karen writes great newsletters. And we have these free webinars that are really important subjects. If you're volunteering, you might be interested.
Yes, I would.
We're actually doing one on this a week from tomorrow, on the 12th, on how teachers can use current events and bring it into the classroom. Yeah, it really, and Denzel was in the video. It's very good.
And he's come to speak here too. He's been a part of our community conversations.
He has.
And again, too, we'd extend the same invitation to our classes. There's information in the back if you'd ever like to come and just listen in on a class, see what the process is like. We'd love to have you as a part of that. We'll also be starting up in the coming weeks. We're going to start looking for some volunteers to lead just about a half hour or so conversation circle. It'll be an opportunity for students coming in before their ESL or citizenship class and gives them a chance to work on some of that speaking and listening with somebody other than their teacher necessarily. So somebody a little bit from the outside. And it'll be using a common thing of let's talk about a current event, let's talk about a job, let's talk about your pets. Just something little that gives people the opportunity to speak a little bit more in English and help them to learn language as well. So we'll be looking forward to that volunteer opportunity on our end. But we're so lucky to have so many wonderful organizations around us to be able to do this work.
Everybody supports everyone. We're a larger group. You know, we're fully enrolled with about 450 students today. And we have, the last I looked, the waiting list was about 600, 500, 600, somewhere in there, because we just started a new session beginning of January. So we brought students in and it's building up again. I'm going to tell you about one volunteer.
No, you're fine.
We have a volunteer who works with some of our students, helping them get their driver's license. And now, it used to be a young man, it's now a young woman. And that's after classes, you know, after 3 o'clock. When, she helps them out, they're volunteers that help. We have literary circles, reading circles, through our family literacy program, and volunteers help out.
Like we had our...
There are a lot of opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Our next lecture coming up, as everybody knows, is March 11th. Local historian Irene Axelrod will be here talking about the life and legacy of Lydia Pinkham. So certainly a local legend, so make sure you get yourself signed up for that lecture. If we don't see you sooner, we'll see you in March. Thank you, everybody.